What's up, everyone? This is SC Ayala, and welcome back to SC Ayala Talk, Lovesick Pages of a Poetic Heart. We are on the journey exploring my book. Tonight we're going to be on page 61. If you guys have been around for the last couple weeks, then you guys know that we've been going over more love from the Lovesick version of this book. And I've been highlighting some of the moments that inspired me to write about the kids. And without further ado, we're going to continue with that. Page 61, and this one is entitled Justin Baby. And let's go. Justin Baby. My Justin Baby, how sweet you are, so close to me and yet still too far. How I loved you before you were born. How I love more of you as you are growing. In the morning we play, and in the day we run in the sun. All because you're you, and you're everything I prayed you would be. You'll always be, even at 63. You'll always be my little Justin Baby. So, short and sweet and to the point. That was Justin Baby, page 61. And the backstory to that. So, obviously, one of my boys, that's my oldest, that was my firstborn. Justin is now in his mid-30s. It's going to hate me for saying that, but I'm going to say it anyways. He's in his mid-30s. So, not quite 63, and not quite 4, but definitely still my baby. As big as he is and as tall as he is, he's still mom's baby. Backstory to that, again, is just being inspired as a parent, as a mom, looking at your kid, when they first get here, they're all cuddly and cute. Then they grow up and, the toots come in, in the teens and, even into his 20s, doing things that maybe, we're not always so privy to know about, but we know about because we're moms, and even with the things that they always try to keep from me, like, oh man, if mom ever finds out we took her truck when she wasn't, I just think it's a boy thing. Boys tend to do a lot more than I think the girls ever attempted, or maybe the girls were just, better at sneaking whatever they were trying to do. But I think with the boys, both my boys, they just tried more, They did more. They were more adventurous, and in Spanish, it's being traviesos, mischievous, And I think a lot of times my oldest son, because I was so young, I was had just turned 18, and, I had him a few months shy, the following year, going into my 19th year. And I think he was closer to my little brother's age than even what I would consider, a son's age, if that makes any sense. I guess what I'm trying to say is I was a kid, and babies don't come with instructions, and I think sometimes life was unfair, not just to me, but to him. You go from being taken care of to you now have to take care of. And the people around you don't really see you as, well, you're under 21, you can't even buy a drink. Like, how good of a mom can you be? And, shout out to the young girls, because I made it my point, in life to advocate for young mothers, teen moms. And I've seen my fair share, in being different groups and, just like I said, being an advocate for young parents, and just being an encouraging reinforcement to those that have been, either part of, our groups and things like that I've been a part of throughout the years and stuff. Anytime my kids in their school years encountered a friend or whatnot, and, that may have been someone that, was a teen parent, I just encouraged my kids to be friends. If they were your friend before, be a friend now, because now's when they're really going to need real friends. And I explained to them, it wasn't easy having your big brother and watching your friends just kind of go away. I still have some childhood friends that had stuck around even after I became the teen mom. You couldn't go out to the clubs and you couldn't really do too much. And, people wanted you to just be at home, and that was that. And, I don't know anyone who actually says, okay, yeah, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to go do that. And, I'm not going to take care of my kid. I don't think that's really in a mom's head. I think at some point, moms do need breaks though. And as much as I try to be there, even for my own daughter now, who, has a young child of her own, it's amazing because, at, their mid-20s, late 20s, it's still not easy, but you do need me time, and that's kind of what grannies are for, and, you want to make sure that even if you have a daughter, and let's say, something happens and they do get pregnant in high school, or a son that ends up, having a baby while they're in high school, they're just young. It just happened young. It doesn't make it a mistake or an inconvenience. Hell, stubbing your toe in the middle of the night is an inconvenience. But having a child and, like I said, I know plenty of these young girls that had babies in high school that I've helped educate, and like I said, a positive reinforcement in ensuring that, hey, look, you will graduate. You can do this. And just kind of being a surrogate to those that needed help, Mom and dad didn't appreciate it, kicked them out of the, the house or whatever the home situation was, Hey, look, you can go to UEI. I've got a few hours after work. We can, help with the baby. My kids love kids. There's a house full of kids. Your kid might even think he's probably one of ours, There were always kids in our house. There was always kids wanting to go to Sunday school with us, and there was always kids wanting to just hang out because we were the house with kids. And I think sometimes back to that time when I had my first, and being 19 years old with my first child and going, wow, we were so young. I truly mean that. We were so young. I know he loved the energy that I still had because I was able to run around with him and I wasn't an older mom, but I sometimes feel like I didn't know enough. I didn't do a fair justice to him, because I was still growing and growing up, and I'm grown enough to say that, a lot of people try to deny that, they weren't ready, they weren't prepared, and, that they're, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I know 50-year-olds that are having kids, and don't know what they're doing. None of these kids come with, instructions and whatnot. You kind of got to make the best with what you have. And no matter how prepared you are, how much money you have, these babies do not come with instructions. And you're not guaranteed a perfect kid. And I'll be the first one to say it. They're not guaranteed perfect parents when they get here. So if you're a young mom, a single mom, struggling parents, struggling young parents, high school teen parents, elder parents, whatever the case it might be. Just know it's going to be okay. They just want love. They just want your attention. And whether you're working 2-3 jobs to put food on the table, or you're just trying to get by doing the best that you can with what you have, and all you got is 20 minutes that you can give to that baby after school, in between, dinner time, nap time, whatever the case might be, make sure that 20 minutes, they got your full undivided attention. Because I promise you, it's the quality of the time. You could have 20 hours to spend, with just your kid and not really be there, So make sure that if you have 20 minutes and that's all you have, make that 20 minutes the best 20 minutes. Play those imaginary games. Have the fun that they want to have with their parent. They just want that connection, So, again, kind of the backstory about my oldest. And I know they listen. And I just want to say to that guy, thanks for being my best friend that I didn't even know I needed, at the time. I think Justin sometimes got cheated, He was the big brother, so he was always in charge, and most likely probably got in the most trouble if one of the younger ones, God help us all, if one of the younger ones did anything and got hurt, everybody always went to the oldest one. And being an oldest, it was kind of the same thing. And, there's just so many things that I could just say to him, but I think the biggest thing is just letting him know how much I love him and how proud of him I am. He's a great dad. He's got his own children now, and, all I can say is I'm very proud that he's turned out to be just a decent man, a good father, and a good husband. So, again, that was the backstory to that. That was page 61, Justin Baby. I am SC Ayala, and you are listening to SC Ayala Talk. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. And again, if you guys want to comment, please feel free. Until the next one, this is SC Ayala, and I'll see you on the next page.